Like this, Jax, go.
And then go, action.
Action.
I came to McKinsey Company in 1995 from a mechanical engineering undergrad degree. And so when I came into the firm, I did a lot of operational work. Now, at the same time, I was courting a woman who was an Australian. She was living in London at the time. But things fortunately went well, and we decided that we were going to get married, and then we had the choice between Cleveland and Australia, and to me that wasn't too hard of a choice, so we moved down to Australia. On the personal side of things, I was just living the young professional lifestyle, and you move from having an apartment into a nicer apartment to then, we can afford a house, great, and let's start a family, and we had our first child. And then my second child came, who is Jackson. And Jackson's official diagnosis is profound diffuse bilateral brain damage. And he's got lesions, meaning dead cells, in lots of the parts of his brain. And when he was born, he was what they call cortically blind, cortically deaf, and unable to have voluntary movement, largely. So he could, it's not that he couldn't move at all, but it was just voluntary movement. He couldn't put it all together. When that happened and he was born, it's obviously a heavy thing to go through. And we were told, early on, like, hey, you should just check him into an institution. He's sort of done. I remember one of the doctors who did not have a good bedside manner said, they even kind of called him a doorstop. Is like what his prognosis was. So it was that kind of full-on thing. And, I think a little bit in the spirit of rock and roll, my wife and I said, look, what have I been trained for the last 5 years, if not to figure out how to solve tough problems? And what a blessing that our family's in a situation where I could probably take 6 months off and we could reach out and we could try to find the right team of people who could aspire to helping Jackson in the same way we would want to aspire to help him. People who believed he could be more than a doorstop, so to speak.
Yeah, push. Little help. Good one.
I took 6 months off. We found some really incredible people who had these crazy theories based on neuroplasticity, which nowadays is a sort of well-recognized and proven notion, which is the brain will change itself depending on the function that's demanded of it. And so the idea was that if we shined a tungsten halogen bulb in his eyes, which is like a quarter of a sun at that length or at that distance, 100 times a day, and if we did air horns in his ears 100 times a day, and if we lifted him up on this this slide, it's an inclined plane is what we were told to call it, but it was a slide, and the incline is such that if he moves even involuntarily, he moves a little bit down, but not all the way, and his food's at the bottom. Unfortunately, there was nothing wrong with his ability to kind of eat and digest and all that sort of thing. And the idea is you don't know what frequency, intensity, or duration it's going to require, but at some point, the brain is going to realize when those air horns are going so loud in his ears so frequently during the day that I need to hear something. And you're basically amplifying Mother Nature 100-fold. And so we decided to, we believed that the brain would change itself. And it took a long time. But at some point, I'll never forget, we did air horns in his ears and you saw his eyes move. And you didn't know if it was just like was that cause and effect? And then of course we start going, doing it over and over, trying to get to repeat it. But over the course of a couple days after the first time it happened, sure enough, he was hearing some of what was going on. His sight ended up coming in, took us about 9 months, but he could start to kind of track things.
Good boy, Jackson.
His whole journey has been this journey that in my professional life, when I decided to take that time off, and I decided to go and connect with this potential group of people who believed in human potential in a way that could help my son, it expanded my world incredibly. And it meant that I didn't want to go back to the McKinsey I left. Not because there was anything wrong with McKinsey, it's just because I had changed and I didn't want to spend my life's energy doing the next strategy project or doing the next operational project. I wanted to spend my life's energy helping people achieve full human potential like we're trying to do with my son. And there were a lot of techniques we were exposed to and a lot of just ways of thinking that also felt like they could be really helpful in the workplace and help unlock employee productivity through unlocking employee fulfillment, through unlocking people being able to bring their full selves through the door in the workplace, rather than I'm passionate and excited in my scout troop, but during my day-to-day it's kind of drudgery. How do we get that same passion into the workplace? That became a really powerful motivating factor for me. And I didn't think I would do it at McKinsey. And it was my office manager at the time, his name was Adam Lewis. He sat me down. I was planning on resigning, and he sat me down and said, Scott, think about really what you want to do with your life that's worth being away from Jackson and that whole program, because I needed to make money to be able to pay for this whole thing we were doing with Jackson. And he said, think about what that is and get really clear, and then come tell me why you can't do that at McKinsey. When I really thought about it, so McKinsey is an organization who has relationships at the top of the house with 80% of the Fortune 500. A huge number of something like 67 million people work for large corporations like the Forbes 2000 corporations in the world. So who influences their lives more than anyone else is probably the CEO, because they spend more of their time and energy in the workplace than they probably spend outside of the workplace. At that time, this is like 2002, 2003, the goal was like, hey, maybe at McKinsey we can help unlock human potential at a scale that could never otherwise be done but not for McKinsey, by influencing CEOs to create workplaces that are more aligned on their direction, have a higher quality of interaction so there's no friction in the system, have a deeper sense of meaning and motivation. And that became a crusade. So this book, for me, is actually just I pinch myself thinking like, wow, Jackson set me on a course. When it comes out, it'll be 20 years ago. He set me on that course. And I think at that point, I'll be able to say, wow, we did that. I didn't do any sort of formal English training or anything. I would say that I have always been deeply into storytelling, I would put it, and love to use the analogical imagination to connect things that might not normally be connected, and then to tell a story around that, get people excited about it. And when I interviewed for McKinsey, for example, I had got to my hotel the night before, and it was, I didn't travel a lot. I grew up, if we did travel, it was sort of by car. And so I had flown into Cleveland, Ohio for this interview. And I remember looking in my closet, and I unzipped my suit coat bag, which I assumed my suit was in, and I opened the jacket, and there's no pants. And I'm looking at the jeans I'm wearing, which as a heavy metal fan and things had like rips across them, and were at the time I think were acid wash. And I'm thinking, okay, I have a like business on top, party on the bottom look for tomorrow, and this is not gonna go well, right? There's a long story about what I tried to do that night to find suit pants in Cleveland, Ohio, that involves me ending up hitchhiking and a whole bunch of things. And anyway, the next morning I had interviews with one company that was not McKinsey, and then on the back of it, I had the afternoon of interviews with McKinsey. So I got up to the top floor where I'm interviewing with the executive team of this industrial company. And I just said like, all right, before we get into it, just want to explain. And then I told them my story. And the interview lasted about a half hour. They said, look, you're in. And I got to McKinsey, told the story. Who knows whether I would have got the job without leaving my pants in South Bend, Indiana at Notre Dame when I had the interview in Cleveland, Ohio. So things like that, I guess, have always come naturally to me or been part of my repertoire of working in the world. And so that the writing probably stems from that too. And the last thing I'll say on this is part of the reason I don't read a lot in the business book world of things is because it's just kind of boring, to be honest. So I've always felt like, man, if I can just make this a little more interesting and a little more street level than what I'm reading, that there at least is a group of people out there who might benefit from it because it's a slightly different style. And so I always aspired to have it just very plain English and not a lot of frameworks and pretty easy to understand. One of the things that struck me more than I had anticipated, and I think is different than most people view a group of CEOs like we interviewed, is the humility aspect. Reed Hastings told us a story where he kind of learned about servant leadership that was quite literal, where he talked about how he, as a young engineer before Netflix, would work, almost all night working on a code, doing his thing. And then he would, leave and there would be coffee cups everywhere around his workstation, and he'd get some sleep and he'd come back. When he came back, his workstation was clean. All the coffee cups were clean, ready to go. He could go get more coffee in the kitchen. Anyway, one night he finished up late, goes home as he does, but he couldn't sleep because he was just it's all busy brain, everything going through his head. And so he comes back to the office. And when he comes back to the office, someone's in the kitchen cleaning the cups. And he sort of goes in to get more coffee, and he does a double take, and it's the CEO of the company. And he says, "What are you doing?" And and the CEO says to him, "Reed, you do so much for us. This is the least I can do for you." And that was a story for Reed that really helped crystallize for him the type of servant leader he wanted to be. But for me, it was a story that really represented these CEOs, more than I ever imagined, had a servant leadership bent to them. And in counseling CEOs, one of the ways to help motivate and influence great CEOs is actually less talking about what they can do and more talking about how they can put the conditions in place for others to do more. And that lens on things, and that lens on helping a CEO be great in the role, which actually comes through helping others, is definitely something that is more pronounced now in my counseling and a lens that I view it through. And that I think the CEOs I work with really appreciate. And in those that don't, it creates an interesting conversation around why not, because greatness actually lies in helping other people be great. I've always been a huge heavy metal fan. Since I heard my first Judas Priest song in 5th grade, it was just, what is that? I need more of that. For me, heavy metal music in particular, it's the sonic representation of empowerment. I mean, it has the combination of the discipline of almost a monolithic beat and guitar riffing, and it has this freedom and omnipotence, if you will, of the guitar solo over the top and the big soaring vocals. And when I hear it anyway, it is energizing. I wake up in the morning and I don't need a shower or a cup of coffee. I just need to put on some, Metallica or some Iron Maiden or whatever it might be. That energy vibe in my professional life, when I address people, for example, it's sort of like, "What's up, rock star?" And, all those silly things. But I'm very enthusiastic, put it that way. And that enthusiasm is part of like the energy that empowers me in the music. And I do think the great rockers, it seems like all party and fun, but wow, when you really peel it back, they worked really hard, did a lot of woodshedding learning their art, and they are serious musicians. They do the work. It might not feel like it might look like it's totally fun, but they do the work. And I think there's a work ethic there that I feel like is very much part of that rock and roll ethos. So what's a typical day in the life? I would say the thread that runs through all of those is I'll play guitar every day. I'll typically practice my Spanish every day because it's something I want to keep up. I'll work out most days. I always have a day off, but I have a normal routine that I'll work into that. And, I'll have quality time with family, just hanging and doing stuff. And, my world, I'm a complete nerd by training, if you will. I was a mechanical engineer undergrad. And I did a lot of operational work with the firm when I first came to the firm. So the idea of having a control chart for your life was something that it really appealed to me. So I actually have kind of KPIs, those things I just mentioned on like how much time did I spend playing guitar? How much time did I spend hanging with the family? How much time, did I work out or not? I can tell you for the last 26 years at the firm what my average is per week on all those things. Believe it or not. And so I've kept my life in balance by having those checks and balances. And I know how many hours a week I've worked. Why did you choose JJ Raw Power as your stage name?
Because I have all my core stage gear and I have the bandana and I have your wristbands.
Yeah, you wear wristbands, bandana, you got your glasses on, right?
Yeah.
You transform into JJ Raw Power.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's JJ Raw Power's what?
Special Forces.
Special Forces. Yeah, that's his band name.
Yeah.
So, that's cool.
Yeah.
What's your favorite band?
Metallica.
Nice. And what's your favorite song?
I really like We're Not Gonna Take It.
Oh, We're Not Gonna Take It, Twisted Sister. Classic. Yeah. Hey, Jax, do you know what Dad does for his job?
McKinsey.
And what do I do at McKinsey?
You help people make the right things.
And what does Dad do every week? How does he spend his time? What is he doing during the day?
He works out and lifts big weights.
Lift big weights? What else? What else does Dad do during the day?
He drinks lots of coffee.
I drink lots of coffee? Okay.
Yeah.
And what else do you see me do?
He works on this book.
Yeah, I work on my book. That's true. Anything else?
I don't know. What else do you do, Dad?
What do we do at bedtime?
We tuck in.
Yeah, we tuck in. What do we do at mealtime?
We eat dinner.
Yeah, we eat dinner together.
Yeah. JJ Wapow.
Yeah, rock and roll.
Rock and roll, Dad.
Do it. Love you.
Jackson, slow
Have
down.
a great day.